Hello friend, you find me today just embarking on a new very big oil painting, well, big for me anyway. And before I go any further into this, I would like to offer up a disclaimer and an apology for the quality of these opening shots. I promise it does get better. Thing is, I had an absolute devil of a time filming this process for this painting because I work in a teeny tiny little home studio, which it's our office really, which has to double up as my creative space when we're not working in it. So yeah, it was really difficult for me to find anywhere where I could put my camera where you could basically see what I was doing without me getting in the way and cropping everything out. So apologies, these first few bits of the sequence are not great, but fortunately this is the really ugly phase of the painting, so it doesn't really matter. Anyway, so I'm starting out, as I always do, working in acrylics rather than oils, because acrylics dry nice and quickly and it's a chance for me to basically rough everything out and get through that ugly stage a bit quicker. And I'm actually painting just around the back of the canvas a little bit, just as I lay down all of the darker tones, because this is going to be a black painting essentially. It's a panther against a dark background, so I like to paint all of my paintings in such a way that they don't need to be framed unless you want to, and if you just paint around the edges of the canvas, then sometimes you can still see a little bit of white canvas showing through, and that just annoys me. So yeah, I'm definitely not a perfectionist by any standards. I think if you watch any of my videos you will know this, and it's pretty clear from what I'm doing right now that I'm not a perfectionist, but I do like paying attention to detail, so I feel that's important. So moving on to the first layer of details, really, now that I've laid down some groundwork, I'm moving into my water-soluble oil paints now, but I'm working very lean with these at the moment, and by lean I mean they're quite watered down with white spirits essentially, rather than a thick sort of viscous medium. So again, this just helps to speed up the process of drying in between coats and helps me to just work in a slightly more free and expressive way, whilst still enjoying that advantage that you have with oil paints of retaining that lovely sort of that high moisture level. Sorry, words. And I'm probably being a little bit more detailed than I need to be at this stage. It's just the first layer, but yeah, I'm someone who enjoys getting lost in all the details, and I'll admit I did end up working this over and over and over, probably a lot more than I needed to. But this, I should say, it's only my second ever oil painting that I've done, so that's a bit of a challenge in and of itself. So I'm still getting to grips with oil painting as a medium, having used acrylic paints and other water-based paint media, basically since I was a child. But also, this painting is the biggest painting that I have done for quite some time. It's sort of 50 by 70 centimeters or 20 by 28 inches, which I realize is not huge by some people's standards, but for me, I haven't done a painting on this scale for a very long time. I think since I was in school, essentially, and that was a very, very long time ago. Like, yeah, at least a couple of decades we're talking here. So yeah, hence it was a bit of a struggle for me to film this in such a way that you can see what I'm doing. without me, getting my big ugly hand in the way there. Oh, look at that. Sorry. I do try whenever I'm filming myself to get out of my way a little bit, if that makes sense. But at the same time, I can't afford to kind of tiptoe around the camera too much, because then I just get all up inside my own head about what I'm filming, and I just need to go with the flow and concentrate on what I'm doing, really. So mercifully, most of the footage that I captured was good enough that I could share it here. And this is where I was having a lot of fun modelling the eyes. I should say, even though this is, I called it a black painting because it's a black panther. It's an Amur leopard against essentially a black background. There is very little black paint on this canvas. The only place where I've used Spinel black, which was the blackest black that I have, is just in the pupils of the eyes, in the nostrils, and that lovely sort of oil slick black gum line that big cats have. All over the rest of the painting, it's Payne's grey, which admittedly is a very, 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 very dark grey. If you were to see it, you'd probably say it was black. But I've mixed it with cerulean blue for the highlights, those tones where the so like that specular light is really shining through, and then it's mixed with some burnt umber for those shadowy parts of the painting where it's a little bit warmer. So even though it's a black animal, jet black all over with very little variation in terms of the colour except around the muzzle, it's surprising actually how much colour variation you actually get in the fur and in those little sort of corners where the fleshy undertones shine through. One of the things that I really enjoyed about working from the reference image that I was working from was that as you often get with big cats, the nose was a little bit scarred and a little bit rough, hence the name Prizefighter. And I actually took it a little bit further and played fast and loose with the sort of the scarring tissue around the nose. I really love how the nose looks at this point in the painting. I kind of wish that I sort of left it here, at least as far as the nose is concerned, because I really love that half-finished sort of very painterly roughness about it. But I always just have too much fun trying to push things as far as I can into realism. I've never been able to handle photorealism. I think maybe I just lack the patience. But I do get a kick out of making something look as true to life as I can, whilst still, I hope, having something of my personality in there and my visual style, I suppose, which is always constantly evolving. But I like to think that irrespective of the medium that I'm using and where I'm at in my career, that my paintings do have a consistent look that is mine and no one else's, which is the lovely thing about working in analogue media as I do now. And if you're new here, a bit of my background is I'd work in analogue media when I was in school and as a student quite a lot, but I graduated just at a point in history, so like early 90s, when the pervasive message was everything's going to be digital from now on. There was no point trying to make a career as a traditional fine artist, and if I'm honest, that's not really where I wanted to take my career at that point anyway. So I've spent about 20 odd years pretty much purely working in digital media, and just very recently realised that I just really want to draw and paint again in analog materials. So there's been a lot of sort of relearning things that I'd forgotten I ever knew, and learning an awful lot of new stuff as well. And yeah, I'm making up for a lot of lost time, I think, with this. But it's a fun process to go through, and I learn more about myself as a painter and maybe a little bit as a person, I like to think, with every painting that I create now. And I have to say as well, also, all those years I spent doing digital painting, mostly using Photoshop, it's definitely not wasted. I learned a great deal about the creative process, and a lot of the techniques that I picked up from all those years of doing digital art, I can apply very much to the analog art that I work on now, and vice versa. All of my painting and drawing skills initially enabled me to create the digital art that I made for so many years. So it's not an either-or proposition, I guess, is what I'm hoping to get to here. It doesn't have to be one or the other. And again, one of the things that I love applying in this process for this painting is just that range of colours in the highlights and the shadows that don't register as being lots of different colours necessarily when you look at the image as a whole. But yeah, just little sort of specular areas of very light blue, very sort of burnt rusty reds, some lovely purpley browns all around the eyes, and it all comes together to create this one sort of holistic image. That's the magic of painting. I love it. And at this point in the painting, sorry, I realise I've waffled off a little bit, as I often do in these videos, and forgot to talk about the actual painting that I'm working on. At this point, I've already got one layer of, or one or two layers of very lean paint, and I'm going in now with some much fatter paint with the oil paints. And yeah, by fatter I mean I'm using an actual medium out of the bottle now to thin my paints rather than white spirit. So I'm having to be a lot more careful about not smudging things, as I quite often do as I'm working on these. Sorry again, I'm getting in the way quite a lot, and yeah, there's quite a lot of glare because yeah, working in a tiny home office space that doubles up as my studio. But yeah, having the nice sort of glossy, well fattened oil paints at this point makes blending and sort of modelling all that form much easier. And as I'm going in to get as much of texture on the fur as possible, I try to have a general direction that the fur is travelling in, but it's not all necessarily going in the same way. There will always be some clumps and stray hairs that are just sticking out and doing their own thing, and that just helps to make the animal look a little bit more realistic. It's a bit more alive. And here the wonderful challenge of doing a black painting is I want there to be some corners of the canvas that are very richly dark, but I don't want it to be flat at any point. Even in the background, I've tried to get enough variation between that essentially very, very, very dark blue and the very, very, very dark brown that it doesn't look like it's just stuck on a flat surface, essentially. Now this comes to the really fun part for me, where the end is really in sight now for this painting. It's really coming together very nicely, and it's all about those extra little textures, little flecks of whiskery bits around the muzzle, the individual pores inside the nose, and little specular highlights all around the gums. I did struggle a little bit with this side of the muzzle that is in shadow. I ended up having to work into it quite a lot. I think part of the issue I had was just the glossiness and glare of the paint as it was drying. Made it quite difficult for me to gauge where various bits were actually finished. Like I say, I was trying to get that sense of 3 dimensions, particularly in that muzzle, because it's the most apparent part of the animal. It's the part of the animal that is closest to the viewer. So it really was very important that I get that right, and that shouldn't ever look flat. Now, if the background looks a little bit flat, then that's okay. I'm cool with that because it's not the focal point of the painting. But yeah, for the muzzle, this part in the very foremost foreground, I did end up having to go over it quite a lot. Again, probably more so than I should have had to, but I think it was worth it to get those very fine highlights prominent, and then those darker shady bits really richly black and in shadow. Getting this darkest zone of the painting to the point where I'm really happy with it has been a bit of a challenge, but it's part of the reason why I wanted to paint this subject really in the first place, because I've never actually painted a panther before, even though I love them and I have drawn them at various points in my life. I've never actually depicted one like this using this medium and on this scale, so it's been a very interesting challenge to get that wonderful sort of darkness, but also that interest, and working into the eyes now. Here again, I've left finishing the eyes pretty much until the end, which I realise a lot of artists don't do. I was going to say most artists. I have no idea what most artists do, but what I tend to do is I'll work into the eyes as much as I need to initially, just to get a sense for the gaze of the subject and the mood and their whole sort of emotion and attitude, and also basic stuff like getting the eyes the same size and exactly level, which sounds like a really basic thing, but it is something that I struggle with, and I struggled with this painting as well, even though I measured quite stringently all of my proportions, and I still ended up feeling that the eyes were a little bit wonky at one point, and I had to adjust a little bit. But here again, I'm working in a slightly different way using the oils from how I would with the acrylics, in that I'm placing down sort of quite crude looking blebs of colour for the eyes, and then blending with a clean dry brush and working with the grain of the muscles in those eyes to gently get this sense of quite pronounced form, but also that sort of magical kaleidoscope effect that all eyes have, irrespective of the species, of the subject that you're depicting. I mean, I say that I don't particularly want to gaze into the eyes of a spider for any length of time. Not just because I'm arachnophobic, but also they're just glassy black orbs filled with nothing. But yeah, most eyes have this wonderful depth and complexity to them, which is quite challenging to show in a painting, and hence I'm working in various layers, one on top of the other, and just giving those layers a chance to dry out where I need them to. So here I'm coming in again, having allowed the layer beneath to dry out a bit, and just adding some of those little rivulets and veins that actually run counter to that radial sort of trend throughout the rest of the eye. And now finally we are on the home stretch, and it's just a question of adding a few last little tweaks and touches to the surface, and then I think I am happy with this one. I should say the painting that I've ended up with does not perfectly match the reference image that I was using. It's probably not intentional, but none of my work ever does perfectly match the reference imagery. But I rather like that about it in a way, because I think it's a bit more interesting. If you're just copying a series of photographs but in paint, I kind of feel like what philosophically was the point of that, unless it's just an observational study for the sake of building your skills, then of course that makes perfect sense. But yeah, I think it's fun just letting the subject in your painting reveal themselves and let them turn into someone who is actually quite different and unique, and not necessarily the individual that you have in the reference image. So now I'm coming to really the last piece of this puzzle, which is adding the whiskers, and this is the part that I always slightly dread, and I end up tiptoeing around it a little bit, and here I am just kind of delaying the inevitable, really, in a way, by adding some highlights before I actually go in and start adding the whiskers. And I'm starting with the whiskers on the chin, just because they are slightly less prominent, and it's a chance for me to just get my groove on and make sure I'm using the correct weight with my brush before I move on to the whiskers on the muzzle. And I recently got this tip from another I got this tip from another wildlife artist that I follow here on YouTube, to use a sword liner for the whiskers. So that's what I'm using here. But again, I mentioned that I tiptoe around things. I stood back at one point and realised, oh wait, I still want to do some more on the eyes. So yeah, the whiskery bits around the eyes were not quite looking prominent enough for me. Hence, I'm going back in and just adding a little bit more of a highlight around here. Okay, I can't put it off any longer, so I'm going in, doing the whiskers with my sword liner, which is a really lovely brush to use. I've got a couple just so that I have some options to work with. And I'm starting out with the whiskers on the darker side because I want to work from dark to light. And I'm starting with whiskers that are really very, very dark because I want them to blend with that lovely sort of deep, rich shadow in that corner. And again, apologies, there wasn't really any way for me to set up my camera with the very limited space that I have at an angle where you can see me working without me getting in the way too much. So yeah, hopefully these shots aren't too bad and you can actually see what I'm doing to an extent. And even on this lighter side of the face where the whiskers are picking up more of that specular highlight, I'm still starting out working in quite a dark shade and then tracing directly over some of these strokes because I don't want every whiskery strand to be a uniform colour all the way from the root to the tip. I want some of them to have a few lighter areas where they're just picking up that highlight. But now it is time for the big reveal. Even with all the challenges that I faced, I am so happy with how this painting has turned out, and so happy that you have joined me for the painting of it. Thank you so much for spending time with me, and I hope to see you in the next one.